Hi everyone, this is Samantha Sapolsky, and this is my presentation for Transport and Telescope, Service for Students from 1937 to 2012. So, Transport and Telescope is a bi-directional approach historians use to evaluate documents, and they use documents as transportation into the past where they gather information, and then they use this information to move forward and assess the consequences of the document. And so that's where the transport and the telescope come from, and this is the approach that Worley and Doran used in this essay. This essay also points out shared similarities to historical context with today's landscape of higher education. So a quick look back over time. In 1999, the Journal of Higher Education released an anniversary issue containing articles from 1930 to 1939. These articles highlight the conditions of American higher education in the 1930s. And written in 1937, the student personnel point of view provides insight into higher education and its similarity to today's landscape. The similarities from 1937 and today include war, terrorism, economic turmoil, critique of higher education, and costs associated with higher education. Then a movement began in the 30s in response to scientific research and knowledge, which urged colleges and universities to look at the student as a whole versus his or her intellect. Terms such as guidance, counseling, advisory, and personnel began to describe the professional work being done on college campuses. So it kind of shifted the view of what it meant to be a professional in the higher education setting. Using the words such as guidance, counseling, advisory, and personnel kind of began to describe the new approach to higher education and to the professional field of higher education. And a second point of view was written in 1949, which addressed facing what the authors called dilemma of diversity, which was pushing college campuses across the nation to serve new student populations. So this also kind of brought forth the new way of student professionals and professionals in the student affairs practice. So due to this push in diversity, the GI Bill, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and the Higher Education Act of 1965, community colleges, regional state universities, and tribal colleges began to grow. And then in the 1960s and 70s, added an emphasis on student development, which called for proactive programming that would promote student growth. So this kind of pushed even further for professionals in the field of higher education to focus on not only the student as a whole, but the diverse student, as well as giving them tools and opportunities to develop as a person versus just a student. Scholars also introduced a complementary critical cultural perspective that informed professionals on how to better serve diverse populations. And then the past and the present. Today we are continuing to emphasize student development. However, it has shifted due to student expectations that institutions will provide services to them. So we now believe that through service delivery, we can encourage growth and development. And this new approach requires professionals to focus on the how versus the what of our work. So focusing on how we deliver these services versus what we're delivering to the students. Housing and dining services were considered student personnel services in 1937. However, today, some of these operations may fall under auxiliary services at colleges and universities. Financial aid and academic records continue to be addressed by specific personnel in today's landscape. And services such as career centers and academic advising provide services to students that help them clarify occupational and educational goals. So the changes in this area shift from a one-on-one approach where, advisors or faculty professionals would meet with students to kind of shifting to things such as career fairs and courses pertaining to university life that you may have taken, as a freshman. So it switches the approach in order to serve multiple students at a given time. So that way, each student can receive these services. So that, I thought that was kind of interesting in the article, seeing, the approach it was in the 30s and then the approach it's taking now, and how that's kind of changing. A second element of the student personnel point of view of 1937 has the supervising, evaluating, and development of extracurricular activities, social life, religious life, and student interests, as well as student discipline. So, extracurricular activities, making sure that, schools are compliant with athletic programming, and today we maintain these commitments by management of student activities, involvement, leadership development, and campus programming, as well as student conduct programs. And we are also serving diverse student populations with things such as women's centers, multicultural offices, and LGBTQ offices, which all exist to aid students in navigating the college experience. So again, making sure that we're moving to serve the student as a whole versus just, academically or as a student, making sure that they can, develop as a person and as an individual, whether it be through, multicultural centers, LGBTQ centers, women's centers, athletics, social life, Greek life, whatever the case may be. And then the assessment, so the National Survey of Student Engagement, or NSSE, measures student growth and development inside and outside the classroom. And the emphasis today remains focusing on the whole student versus just, as I mentioned earlier, versus focusing on just academics. Core competencies due to this have been established for graduate programs to ensure success in educating future professionals, making sure that future professionals are educated in terms of things such as student development theories, practices for student development, and ways in which we can be successful in making sure that we are developing leadership skills or activities that are fostering students to kind of develop themselves as a whole versus just academically. Student affairs today are collaborative and working with various university departments and students inside and out of the classroom. And this allows students to participate in their own growth. A lot of this also has to do with technology. So technology has allowed students to take a more proactive approach in their experience with things such as online registration, payment for courses. We're taking an online course now. So technology, is allowing students to kind of be more proactive in their development as a student and as an individual on campus. We are also allowing students to participate in their own growth in terms of being able to choose, activities and things on campus that they are, interested in pursuing. And then in relation to the Phelan text, the Phelan text discusses the shift in demographics of students. On page 369, Phelan states that by 2000, for example, at two large prestigious state flagship universities, the University of Texas at Austin and the University of California at Berkeley, minorities were a majority. So Phelan also discussed the era of commercialization and consumerism, which is a lot of what this article talked about in the beginning. This focus of students kind of shifted, and students were viewing college as more of a service. So they were the consumers of the service, and this kind of reinforced what Thielen stated on page 392, that to the delight of entering students, colleges and universities had invested mightily in services and facilities that made college life increasingly attractive to the daughters and sons of affluent America. We saw an increase in women in college, which brought about, enforcements such as Title IX, and we also, saw collegiate sports becoming a huge source of fundraising and emphasizing the holistic approach to student life. So Thielen discussed how, students were beginning to see college as a service and as something that, they were being provided with, which, like the article discussed, allowed us as student affairs professionals to kind of shift our approach and making sure that we are focusing on the student as a whole versus just their academics. And so my two pressing questions, the first one is, do you believe the shift from what is provided to students to how it's provided to students is still a primary focus today, or do you believe that they are equally important? So do you think that, we aren't necessarily focusing on what we're providing students, but how we're providing that? Or do you think that it's equally important to focus on both what we're providing, but also how we're providing that for students? And then my second one is looking at how the focus of the student affairs professional has changed since the original student personnel point of view. How do you anticipate the current view to change in the next 5 to 10 years? So do you see us, still focusing on what we're serving to students versus how we're serving things to students? And, do you think that 5 to 10 years from now, our focus is still going to be on, the holistic student and fostering their development, or do you think that, do you anticipate that that is going to change in any way, and if so, how, and how can we as student affairs professionals kind of focus on, the shift that may occur? So that's really all I have for this presentation. And I look forward to reading your responses.